The galaxy had grown tired of wars, but the fighting never truly ended. Planets clashed, empires expanded, and countless lives were lost in battles no one remembered a week later. Yet in the midst of all this chaos, Earth had chosen a different path. The humans believed that even in a galaxy torn apart by war, compassion could survive. It wasn't easy. Other civilizations didn't understand it. Many thought humans were naive, almost foolish for sending only medical ships into active war zones. While other planets built massive war fleets, Earth focused on healing. They built hospital ships equipped with advanced technology to save lives as quickly as possible. These ships weren't armed for combat. They carried doctors, nurses, medics, and supplies. They carried hope. The flagship of this humanitarian fleet was the Solace. It was not a huge warship, but its design was clever. Inside, wards were filled with beds for the wounded. Medical droids moved silently between the rooms, delivering medicine, checking vitals, and assisting the human crew. The ship hummed with life even in the cold silence of space. Commander Elias Ward stood on the bridge, staring at the viewports. Below them, the moon of Dareth hung quietly in orbit around a battered planet. The surface was scarred with the marks of battles long past. Smoke and fire still rose from settlements, proof of how recent the fighting had been. Yet humans did not look at it as an enemy. They looked at it as a place where people, no matter what side they were on, needed help. "Prepare the wards," Ward said. His voice was calm, measured. "We've got survivors coming in any minute." The crew moved quickly, but without panic. Humans had learned over centuries how to remain steady under pressure. Doctors checked their supplies, medics went over their schedules, and engineers double-checked the ship's systems. Everyone knew their purpose: save lives, not take them. When the first shuttles arrived from the battlefield, the crew of the Solace sprang into action. The shuttles were small, battered, and carrying soldiers from both sides of the war. Some were bleeding, some were unconscious, and some were barely clinging to life. Human medics worked tirelessly, administering medicine, stitching wounds, and monitoring vitals. There was no judgment, no hesitation. The people who had once been enemies now lay side by side in hospital beds, and for the first time in weeks there was silence in their minds. Ward walked through the wards, checking on the medics. He smiled at a young doctor who had just stabilized a soldier's condition. "Good work," he said. "Keep moving, we have more coming." As night fell over the moon, the human ship shuttled in and out, carrying the wounded from the surface to the safety of space. The crew worked under artificial lights that bathed the halls in soft warmth. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant, but inside, life clung on fiercely. It wasn't just the wounded soldiers who impressed Ward, it was the medics themselves. They were exhausted, but they never complained. Their determination was quiet but powerful. Humans had a strange resilience. They cared so much that it often gave them strength beyond what seemed natural. And in that quiet, steady determination, Ward found a sense of pride he rarely felt. Even the aliens noticed it. Some watched the humans with suspicion at first, but as their lives were saved, they began to understand. These humans were different. They didn't fight for territory or glory. They didn't see victory in destruction. They fought for life itself. "Why do they care so much?" one wounded soldier whispered to a fellow patient, barely conscious. "Why not take advantage while we're weak?" The others shook their head. "I don't know. Maybe they're just human." That simple statement captured the truth. Humans acted not out of fear, not out of ambition, and not out of revenge. They acted because they believed in something larger than themselves, something universal. The idea that saving a life was always worth the risk. And it was a risk. Humans were outnumbered and outgunned in every sector of space. Their hospital ships carried no weapons capable of defending them. If anyone chose to attack, they would be helpless. Yet still they went forward. They moved into the heart of conflict zones without hesitation, trusting their purpose to guide them. Ward paused at a viewport, staring down at the craters and smoke-filled valleys below. He knew the crew didn't understand fear the way others did. They weren't reckless, they simply believed in their mission. To them, no life was too small to save. Even a single child caught in the chaos was worth more than the wealth of 1,000 planets. Night passed slowly, the moon silent below, and the Solace continued its work. Every life saved was a quiet victory, unnoticed by the galaxy at large. Yet for Ward and his crew, each smile, each breath taken by the healed was enough. They didn't need recognition. They didn't want power. They only wanted to heal. And so the humans of Earth carried on in their small but unwavering way. They shuttled through the wreckage of war, offering aid where others only saw opportunity. They moved quietly, deliberately, and without expectation of reward. To the crew, every saved life was a reminder of why they existed. Not to conquer, not to fight, but to preserve what was most precious in the universe, life itself. The calm of the night aboard the Solace didn't last long. While humans moved quietly through the halls tending to the wounded, a message arrived from deep within the Dareth system. It was not a friendly greeting. It was a warning, sharp and cold: leave immediately. Your presence is not welcome, the transmission said. Human neutrality is a cover. Withdraw before it is too late. Commander Ward stared at the message on the bridge, his fingers resting on the console. He had expected skepticism. Many alien empires doubted that humans could be neutral in the middle of their wars. Some even thought humans might be spies hiding weapons among their medics. But this warning was different. It carried threat, not curiosity. Ward leaned back in his chair, considering the risk. The humans had a choice: obey and retreat to save space, or continue their mission despite the danger. He knew that leaving would protect the crew and the wounded. But leaving would also abandon thousands of lives who could not defend themselves. Prepare the shuttle teams for deployment, Ward ordered. His voice was calm, steady. We stay, we help. That is our mission. The crew didn't hesitate. They had trained for danger, though not for this kind. Their courage was quiet, rooted in the belief that every life was worth saving. Engineers ran checks on the shuttles, making sure they were ready to carry the wounded from the moon to the ship. Medics prepared supplies, sterile equipment, and medicine. Everyone moved with purpose, understanding the stakes. As the shuttles descended toward the moon, the surface below was a chaotic landscape. Craters and burned settlements marked the battles that had raged only days before. Smoke rose in thin columns twisted by the planet's weak winds. Humans could see the suffering clearly. Soldiers leaning against walls, civilians searching through rubble, children huddled together in fear. Keep your eyes open, Ward said softly to the shuttle pilots. We are here to help, not to judge. Watch for movement, but do not fire. Let them see us as what we are, healers. The humans moved carefully, offering hands to those too weak to stand. They treated burns, bandaged cuts, and lifted people into the shuttles. Even those who had once fought on opposite sides were placed side by side, receiving the same care without question. The humans' actions created a fragile sense of peace, a momentary quiet in the storm of war. Yet the warning from the transmission weighed on Ward. He knew that other ships in the system watched the humans closely. Any wrong move could provoke an attack. He walked through the wards, checking on medics and patients alike. We are doing the right thing, he said to one of the doctors, a young woman with tired eyes but a determined face. That is all that matters. The doctor nodded, but the worry in her eyes didn't fade. They all understood the reality. Mercy was powerful, but it made humans vulnerable. In the galaxy, few believed in neutrality. Most thought strength came from weapons, from dominance, from showing no mercy. Humans showed strength differently, through their refusal to abandon life. And that strength, strange as it seemed, had a kind of gravity that drew attention. Hours passed as the shuttles continued to move between the surface and the ship. The wounded slowly increased in number, yet the humans never faltered. They worked in shifts, covering for one another, resting only when they absolutely had to. Their movements were deliberate and steady, almost rhythmic, like the heartbeat of the ship itself. Some of the wounded began to whisper about the humans' strange bravery. They don't fight, a soldier murmured, looking around at the medics. They only save. Why would they risk themselves like this? A civilian nearby answered quietly, maybe because they are human. They care, even when it's dangerous. That is something different. Ward overheard the conversation and allowed himself a small smile. That was the point. Humans didn't need anyone to understand them fully. Their actions spoke louder than words, louder even than warnings or threats. They didn't act out of pride or fear. They acted out of a simple belief that saving life was the highest purpose. As the night deepened, the moon below seemed almost peaceful for a moment. The fires burned less fiercely and the smoke began to thin. For a short while, the humans brought hope to a place that had seen only despair. And in that fleeting peace, the crew of the Solace reminded themselves why they had come here in the first place. But the warning message was not forgotten. Ward returned to the bridge and activated the communications console. Transmit our status to all nearby fleets, he said. We are neutral. We are healers. We will not fight, and we will not leave the wounded. He watched the message travel across the vast darkness of space, hoping it would prevent conflict. The humans relied not on weapons but on reason, on morality, and on the clarity of purpose. They trusted that, in a galaxy ruled by war, there was still a place for compassion. Yet deep down, Ward knew the universe rarely allowed mercy without challenge. He could feel the weight of the other fleets watching, waiting, questioning whether humans were weak or cunning. He could not predict what would happen next, but he knew one thing. Humans would not abandon life, even if the universe itself seemed to demand it. The moon below, scarred and silent, seemed to hold its breath as the humans worked through the night. Every shuttle that landed carried hope. Every bandage applied, every injured hand held, reminded those who saw it that humans valued life above all else. And as the first light of a distant sun touched the horizon of the battered moon, the crew of the Solace paused for a brief moment. They had survived the first night under threat, and they had upheld their mission. The warning from the other fleets still lingered, sharp and threatening, but it could not touch the courage and determination of humans who chose to heal, even in the heart of danger. That night, the humans proved that their strength was not in weapons, not in numbers, but in a quiet, unwavering devotion to life. And though the galaxy might not understand them yet, humans knew something that no warning could change. Mercy was their power, and it would guide them through whatever came next. The night on the moon had passed, and the first pale light of a distant sun touched the surface. The Solace continued its quiet work, shuttling between the scarred ground below and the hospital bays above. The wounded, both soldiers and civilians, were beginning to feel the care humans offered. For many, it was the first relief they had felt in days, sometimes weeks. Commander Ward stood on the bridge, his hands resting lightly on the railing as he observed the calm below. But the calm was fragile. He knew that other fleets were still watching. Every movement of the human ships was being recorded, analyzed, and questioned. Humans had no weapons to defend themselves in a direct fight, and that made them a curiosity in a galaxy that had long believed strength came only from firepower. Suddenly, the alarms on the Solace blinked red. It wasn't a malfunction. Sensors picked up multiple ships approaching the moon, their movements sharp and precise. The humans had expected observers, but now the observers were moving closer, and the feeling in Ward's chest tightened. He called his officers to the bridge. "We are being watched very closely," he said. "Maintain your stations. Continue your work. Do not provoke them. Our mission is to heal, not fight," the crew nodded. They had faced dangerous conditions before, but never a direct threat. Every human on board understood the risk. They were medics, engineers, and caregivers, not soldiers. Yet they did not hesitate. Each person moved with the same quiet confidence they had shown since arriving in the system. Their courage was steady, rooted in a sense of purpose greater than fear. Down on the moon, the shuttles continued their journeys, carrying those who could barely walk, lifting them from the rubble, and placing them in the safety of the Solace. The humans worked with efficiency born of necessity. Every second counted. Every decision mattered. Yet even with the threat looming, their compassion did not waver. One medic carried a child who had been trapped under debris. The child's small fingers clutched the medic's arm as if refusing to let go. The medic smiled gently, whispering soothing words, and carried the child safely aboard a shuttle. Around them, humans moved calmly, offering comfort and care to anyone who needed it. The wounded were not numbers or enemies. They were people deserving of life. On the bridge, Ward monitored the incoming ships. Their weapons were visible, their intentions unclear, but he could see that they had noticed the human ships' lack of armaments. A part of him knew that in the galaxy, some civilizations considered this a weakness, a mistake that could be exploited. But humans had never relied on weapons to protect their values. Their strength was in their resolve, in their willingness to place life above all else. That resolve would guide them through whatever came next. As the morning light grew stronger, the approaching ships hovered near the moon. Their pilots, watching carefully, seemed unsure. The humans did not make threatening moves. They did not prepare weapons or shields for battle. They continued their work, as though the universe had no other choice but to recognize the value of life. Some of the wounded began to notice the tension. A soldier, leaning on a makeshift crutch, asked the medic beside him, Are they going to attack? The medic shook her head. We are here to heal. That is all we do. Let them watch. We cannot change who we are. The soldier looked at her in silence, and for a moment the chaos of war seemed distant. The human's determination was contagious. It gave hope to the wounded, a quiet strength that reminded them of something they had lost. The belief that someone cared. Even in the middle of a galaxy at war, on the bridge, Ward received a report from one of the shuttle teams. The wounded are stable for now, the officer said. They are grateful, even those who were our enemies. Ward nodded. Good, that is enough. Focus on their care. Nothing else matters right now. The humans' work continued through the day. Shuttles moved tirelessly between the surface and the ship, carrying supplies and people. Medics worked with steady hands. Engineers ensured the ship's systems ran smoothly, and Ward coordinated every movement with care. Outside the ship, the approaching fleets hesitated. They had expected humans to fight, to react with fear or aggression. But the humans did not. Their actions were deliberate, calm, and full of purpose. The observers had never seen anything like it. This was not weakness. It was a different kind of strength, one built on commitment, courage, and compassion. By evening, the humans had treated hundreds of wounded. They had given water, medicine, and care. They had offered comfort and hope in a place that had known only pain. The wounded began to whisper among themselves about the strange and quiet bravery of the humans who risked everything to save lives. They don't care who we are, one soldier said. They just want to help. And that is why they are strong, a civilian replied softly. Stronger than any army I've seen. Ward heard these words and allowed himself a quiet moment of reflection. The galaxy often measured strength in battles won or enemies defeated. Humans measured it differently. Every life saved, every hand held, every child lifted from danger was proof of their power. It was quiet, invisible, and impossible to quantify, but it was undeniable. The night fell again, but the humans did not stop. The Solace glowed softly in orbit above the moon, a beacon of mercy in a darkened system. Shuttles moved in and out, medics cared for the wounded, and the crew maintained a calm, steady rhythm that reminded everyone aboard that life was worth saving, no matter the cost. Ward stood on the bridge, watching the stars. He knew that humans were vulnerable, that other fleets could act at any moment, yet he also knew that humanity's choice to care for others gave them a kind of strength the galaxy had rarely seen. It was not a strength of weapons or fear. It was the strength of conviction, the courage to act rightly even when it was dangerous, and the belief that life was sacred above all else. The approaching ships remained at a distance, unsure, waiting to see what humans would do. And humans continued their work, quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. The galaxy watched, but the humans did not change. They healed. They saved. They reminded everyone that in the middle of war, compassion could still survive. As the night grew deeper, Ward reflected on the day. The warning from the other fleet still lingered in his mind, but he did not waver. Humans did not act out of fear, and they did not act for glory. They acted because it was right. That alone would guide them through the challenges that lay ahead. And so, the humans of the Solace carried on, shuttling between the moon and the ship, healing, comforting, and saving lives. Their courage was quiet, their strength invisible, but it was undeniable. They were not warriors in the traditional sense, but in a galaxy defined by conflict, their mission to heal was a kind of power that no one had anticipated, and a force that could not be ignored. The morning light on the moon was pale, almost fragile, but the humans aboard the Solace were determined. For days they had worked tirelessly, carrying the wounded, treating burns and injuries, and offering comfort to those who had seen too much pain. The crew had expected suspicion from the surrounding fleets, but now the feeling had changed. The Watchers were no longer just curious, they were frustrated. Humans didn't fight, didn't attack, didn't retaliate. They only healed. Commander Ward walked the bridge, observing the reports flowing in. The other fleets were close, and tension hung over the system like a thick fog. Yet he did not panic. Every member of the crew moved with purpose, calm and deliberate, focusing on the task that mattered most, saving lives. Status of the wounded? Ward asked. All stable for now, one officer replied. Supplies are holding and the shuttle teams are operating efficiently. Ward nodded. Good, keep it that way. Remember, we do not respond with aggression. We respond with care. It was a principle the humans held firmly. The galaxy measured strength in weapons, in fleets, and in victories won through force. Humans measured it differently. Strength was in courage, in resilience, and in the quiet determination to save life even when it was dangerous. As the day passed, humans continued their work, shuttling the injured to safety and treating wounds with steady hands. They worked among the smoke and craters under the eyes of fleets that had expected to see panic, fear, or retreat. Instead, they saw something different: resolve. Humans did not run. Humans did not fight. Humans did not stop. They healed. Ward could feel the tension building around the Solace. The observing fleets were restless. They had expected humans to act in predictable ways, either to leave or to defend themselves. But humans refused to conform to expectations. Their neutrality, their refusal to engage in combat, and their unwavering care for the wounded frustrated the onlookers. On the moon below, civilians and soldiers began to notice the strange courage of the humans. A group of injured soldiers whispered among themselves, watching as medics lifted children from rubble and carried them to safety. "They don't care if we were enemies," one said. "They just help." "That is why they are strong," another replied. "Not with weapons, but with courage." The word spread quietly through the settlements and among the wounded. For the first time in weeks, fear and despair began to lose their grip. Humans had brought more than medicine, they had brought hope. Yet the warning from the other fleet still lingered. Ward knew they were still watching, calculating, questioning. A wrong move could provoke them. But humans relied not on aggression, but on purpose. Their actions were deliberate. Their mission was clear. And that clarity gave them a strength no one could measure with weapons. Shuttles moved tirelessly, carrying people from dangerous areas to the safety of the Solace. Medics worked in shifts, often skipping meals or sleep to ensure that no one was left behind. Engineers maintained the ship, adjusting systems and ensuring the shuttles could operate without delay. Every person on board understood their role, and each action contributed to the larger mission: saving lives. As the day grew longer, Ward received reports from the outer scanners. The observing fleets were repositioning, forming a perimeter around the human operations. Their ships had weapons ready, but they did not fire. Humans had not given them a reason to. Ward allowed himself a brief thought. Perhaps their restraint was making the observers question everything they had assumed about humans. The wounded, now stabilized in the Solace, began to recover. Some spoke quietly to the humans who cared for them, expressing gratitude they had long forgotten how to feel. One child, too young to understand the war but old enough to sense danger, reached out to a medic and held their hand. The simple gesture spoke volumes. Humans were trusted. Humans were safe. Humans were different. Ward watched from the bridge as the shuttle teams returned once more. He could see the exhaustion on their faces, but also the quiet satisfaction. They had helped hundreds of people today, and each life saved reinforced the crew's belief in their mission. They did not fight for glory or power. They fought for life itself, and that was a strength no enemy could match. The observing fleets continued to hover, their weapons silent. Humans had not provoked them. Humans had not even acknowledged the threat directly, yet the presence of humans had altered the balance. Their courage, their compassion, and their refusal to abandon life created a tension that no fleet had experienced before. It was not aggression that commanded respect, it was purpose. Even the wounded began to notice. Soldiers who had once fought bitterly against each other now lay side by side, receiving the same care, sharing small comforts, and beginning to trust that someone could act without malice. Civilians who had lost homes, families, and hope began to see that not all beings in the galaxy were cruel or self-serving. Ward allowed himself a moment to reflect. Humans had faced danger before, but never like this. Surrounded by fleets that could destroy them in minutes, they had not acted out of fear. They had acted with purpose, guided by compassion and a refusal to abandon life. That was their strength, and it was a kind of power the galaxy had never measured. Night fell again on the moon, and the humans did not stop. Shuttles continued to move between the surface and the Solace. Medics continued to work tirelessly, lifting, treating, and comforting. Engineers monitored every system, ensuring the mission continued without interruption. The watching fleets had learned something new. Humans were not weak because they did not fight. They were strong because they refused to abandon life even when it was dangerous. That quiet strength created tension, confusion, and respect, though none would admit it aloud. Ward stood on the bridge, looking at the moon below. Fire still burned in places and smoke still rose, but the humans continued their work. Every life saved, every hand held, every child lifted from danger reminded everyone aboard the ship why they had come here. The humans of the Solace worked through the night, not for recognition, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do, and in that simple, unwavering choice, they had already changed the way the galaxy saw them. They had proven that courage was not always measured in weapons or battles. Sometimes it was measured in hands that healed, hearts that cared, and a refusal to abandon life when it was most at risk. By the end of the day, the humans had done something remarkable. They had healed hundreds, comforted countless more, and shown the galaxy a new kind of strength. The observers were no longer just watching, they were reconsidering everything they thought they knew about humans. And the humans did not care. They continued their work as steady and deliberate as ever, guided by one simple truth. Life was worth saving, no matter the danger, no matter the cost. The humans aboard the Solace had worked tirelessly for days. They had healed hundreds of wounded, comforted civilians and soldiers alike, and maintained a steady rhythm despite the danger lurking around them. The observing fleets had remained quiet, watching the humans' movements, unsure of what to do. It seemed as if the galaxy itself had paused, waiting to see what would happen next. Commander Ward stood on the bridge, staring at the moon below. The surface was still scarred from battle, and smoke rose in thin spirals into the cold sky. Fires flickered in distant settlements, but humans had brought small patches of safety. Shuttles moved steadily between the moon and the ship, carrying the wounded to medical bays. Ward felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that even a single mistake could cost lives. "Status report," he asked. "All shuttles operational. Wounded or stable. Medics reporting no new emergencies for now," an officer replied. "The other fleets are holding their positions, but they are becoming restless." Ward nodded. He had expected this. Humans had never relied on weapons to protect themselves. Their strength came from courage and conviction, and that made others uneasy. In a galaxy that measured power in firepower and dominance, humans offered something different: hope. And hope, as Ward knew, could be more dangerous than any weapon. Below on the surface, humans continued to work. A medic lifted a young child from a ruined building, carrying them carefully to a shuttle. Another medic treated a soldier's burns, moving with quiet efficiency. Even the wounded watched in amazement. For some, it was the first time in weeks that they had felt truly safe. Humans had brought not only care but dignity. They treated everyone with respect, regardless of which side they had fought for. Ward knew that time was running out. The other fleets could not watch forever without action. Their patience had limits, and although humans had done everything right, he understood the danger. Sometimes even the best intentions were not enough to prevent tragedy. The alarms on the Solace suddenly flared. Sensors detected multiple objects moving rapidly toward the moon. Ward's heart tightened. The other fleets were moving and not just observing anymore. The humans had expected observation, scrutiny, and skepticism. They had not expected direct action. "Prepare for evacuation of non-critical personnel," Ward ordered. "Shuttles, stay ready. We move only if we must, but we do not abandon the wounded." The crew moved quickly, maintaining calm despite the rising tension. Engineers checked shuttle systems, ensuring they could carry the injured if needed. Medics prepared emergency kits and organized teams. Every movement was deliberate, every decision made with care. The humans had faced danger before, but this was different. This was direct pressure from a galaxy that didn't understand their mission. Shuttles descended to the moon as humans worked feverishly to move the most vulnerable to safety. Civilians who could barely stand were helped into the craft. Soldiers, some injured and some weary, were lifted carefully onto the shuttles. Every life mattered and no one was left behind. The humans moved with a quiet determination that amazed even the watchers. Commander Ward moved between the teams, offering guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. "Steady now. Focus on the task. Every life is important." His calm presence spread through the crew like a steady pulse, reminding everyone of their purpose. As the last shuttles returned to the Solace, the humans had completed the transfer of the most vulnerable. The ship itself became a beacon of hope in the middle of the chaos. The injured rested in the medical bays, watched over by medics who refused to leave their side. The humans had shown the galaxy a simple truth. Life was sacred and every person mattered. Yet the tension remained. The other fleets had not attacked, but their movements suggested impatience. Ward understood that the quiet calm of humans could be misinterpreted as weakness. The galaxy had long equated power with aggression, and humans challenged that belief. Their strength was not in their weapons, but in their courage, compassion, and unwavering purpose. The humans continued their work into the night. Shuttles moved tirelessly, carrying supplies and checking on the injured. Medics worked in shifts, offering care without complaint. Engineers maintained the ship's systems, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Every person aboard understood their role, and every action contributed to the mission of saving lives. Below, the moon remained scarred and fragile, yet it held a strange quiet. Humans had created small pockets of safety in the midst of destruction. Fires that had raged out of control were now contained. Civilians and soldiers alike had hope. For the first time, some began to believe that even in a galaxy ruled by conflict, there could be mercy. Ward reflected on the day's work as he stood on the bridge. Humans had faced danger, uncertainty, and scrutiny. They had not responded with fear, anger, or aggression. They had acted with purpose, with courage, and with compassion. That was their power. That was what made humans different. That was what made them unforgettable. And in that moment, something remarkable happened. Across the moon, systems began to fail. A sudden catastrophic failure struck one of the moon's primary energy cores. Fires flared unexpectedly. Alarms sounded across the abandoned military facilities, and the moon trembled as if in pain. The humans aboard the Solace were stunned, realizing the full consequence of their presence. They had not caused this, but their withdrawal of care, their neutral stance, and the absence of maintenance on the damaged systems had created a fragile chain of events. The moon, once a proud military hub, was now vulnerable in ways no one had predicted. Ward ordered the crew to continue their work, focusing on the injured still in reach. But he could feel the weight of the galaxy pressing closer. The moon's surface erupted in bright flashes, signaling the failure of critical systems. Fires spread quickly and structures that had survived battles collapsed. The humans watched from above, helpless to stop the unfolding disaster but still determined to save every life they could. Even as chaos spread, humans did not panic. Shuttles moved between the surviving areas and the Solace, carrying the wounded and offering comfort. Medics worked tirelessly, their hands steady despite the disaster around them. Engineers adjusted ship systems to support the shuttles and medical equipment. Every action was deliberate, focused, and driven by purpose. In the midst of the chaos, humans continued to show the galaxy something it had rarely seen: courage without aggression, care without expectation, and strength measured not by destruction, but by the preservation of life. Even as the moon fell silent in places, humans refused to abandon their mission. Ward stood on the bridge, watching the moon tremble and collapse in distant flashes of light. He understood that humans had created hope, and hope could not always prevent destruction, but it could always save lives. And that was enough. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy, the power to act rightly, even when the universe seemed indifferent. By the time the night ended, the humans aboard the Solace had saved hundreds more, even as the moon below suffered catastrophic failures. They had faced danger, witnessed the fragility of life, and yet never wavered. The galaxy had seen humans at their most vulnerable, and in that vulnerability it had also seen the most extraordinary courage. Humans had not fought the fleets that had watched them. They had not tried to control the moon or assert dominance. They had only acted as humans always did, with care, courage, and unwavering dedication to life. And in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy that true power is not measured in weapons but in the willingness to protect what is precious, no matter the cost. The silence after the chaos felt heavier than the noise before it. The moon below no longer burned, but its lights had gone out. What had once been a proud stronghold now looked like a quiet grave drifting in the dark. From the bridge of the Solace, Commander Ward stood still, his hands resting on the console. The crew around him spoke softly, voices low, eyes tired but steady. They had done everything they could. Hundreds of lives were saved, pulled from ruins and carried through fire. Every medic, every engineer, every pilot had worked until their hands shook. Now, as the ship floated above the dying moon, exhaustion mixed with something deeper, a quiet sorrow. Outside the windows, the stars blinked against the black. The fleets that had surrounded them were still there, motionless. They had watched the humans struggle, watched them risk their lives to help strangers. But now no one fired. No one moved. It was as if even the galaxy itself had been silenced by what had just happened. Ward finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "Open a channel to all frequencies." The communication officer nodded and adjusted the console. Across the emptiness of space, the human's voice reached the listening fleets. "To any who can hear this," Ward began, "we did not come to fight. We came because we saw pain and could not look away. We are not warriors tonight. We are healers. We are protectors. If what happened here teaches anything, let it be this. Mercy is not weakness." His words drifted through the silence, carried on signals that crossed light years. On ships across the orbit, officers listened without speaking. Some turned away from their weapons. Others looked down, uneasy. No one had expected this kind of strength from a people who had once been dismissed as young, reckless, or dangerous. Down below, the last of the human shuttles were leaving the moon's surface. The landing zones that had once been full of noise were now quiet. The ground teams had brought everyone they could to safety. Fires still burned in the distance, but no one was left behind. As each shuttle rose, the humans looked down in silence. The moon was broken, yes, but not forgotten. Ward walked through the medbay. Rows of injured civilians and soldiers rested on beds. The soft hum of machines filled the air, mixed with the low murmur of voices. A child held the hand of a medic and whispered thanks. A wounded soldier nodded in gratitude before falling asleep. Small gestures, yet they carried meaning greater than any speech. In another corner, engineers worked on damaged equipment. They were exhausted, their faces pale, but they didn't stop. Humans had always been like that, pushed by something invisible, something that refused to let them give up even when everything seemed lost. As Ward passed them, one of the younger crew members asked quietly, "Sir, do you think they understand now?" "The others, those watching us?" Ward paused for a moment before replying. "Maybe not today," he said. "But they will remember. They always remember when someone shows them what it means to be human." Outside, one of the larger fleets began to move, not toward the humans, but away. One by one, their ships broke formation and slipped into the darkness. No transmission, no signal, just quiet retreat. Ward watched the radar as the dots disappeared. The humans didn't celebrate. There was no cheering, no victory speeches. Only relief, a slow, quiet release of tension that had been building for hours. They knew what this meant. The galaxy had seen them not as a threat, not as conquerors, but as something else entirely, as people who carried compassion even into war zones, as a species that would risk everything, not for glory, but for life. Hours passed. The Solace orbited the moon one last time. The crew released small capsules into space, memorial beacons carrying the names of those who had fallen. Each beacon glowed softly, drifting into the darkness. They would float for centuries, silent reminders of the night the galaxy learned what humans stood for. Ward stood at the viewport, watching the fading lights. "Transmit our final report," he said quietly. "Mark the moon as lost, but mark the lives we saved as remembered." The officer nodded, sending the report. Across the systems, data flashed across networks. The record of a humanitarian mission turned tragedy, of lives lost and lives saved, of one small ship that chose mercy over vengeance. As the Solace prepared to leave orbit, a faint transmission came through. It was from one of the alien ships that had remained behind. The voice was hesitant, almost fragile. "Earthship," it said, "your actions were unexpected. We will remember this night. The galaxy will remember." Ward didn't answer right away. He simply looked out at the quiet stars and said, "That's all we ever wanted." The engines ignited and the Solace began its slow journey home. Behind them, the moon drifted in silence, its lights gone but its memory alive. For those who had seen it, the image would never fade. The red cross of Earth shining in the darkness, surrounded by destruction, yet standing firm until the very end. The galaxy had long believed that strength came from domination, that fear kept order, that power ruled. But that night changed everything. The night the moon fell silent was the night the galaxy began to understand that there was another kind of strength, one born of compassion, of courage, of humanity. As the Solace disappeared into the stars, those who watched it leave did so with a strange feeling they couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pity. It was respect. And somewhere deep in the void, where records and stories were kept for ages to come. One line would be written, "They fired on the red cross of Earth, and when the smoke cleared, they found their silence filled not with victory but with humanity."